Welcome the anointed ones. When you activate your real power, you don't just evolve, you disrupt ecosystems built on your silence. Pause and breathe that in. Because right now, somewhere in the group chats, in the dark corners of people's minds and in the mouths of folks who swore they knew you, your name is trending. Not on Twitter, but in the realm of the uncomfortable. And you know what they're saying? You changed. But let's get something straight. You didn't just change. You switched timelines, rewrote contracts, and reclaimed authority over a life that had been under surveillance by energies that had no business being there in the first place. And now, people don't know how to act. They're squinting at your glow like it's a scam. They're side-eyeing your confidence like it's illegal. They're speculating like you joined some secret society when really you just left the one they were unknowingly trapped in. Fact. Psychologists say that when you shift your identity through deep healing or spiritual awakening, people around you often experience disorientation or even grief, because their perception of you is tied to who you were when you served their comfort zone. So no, it's not just in your head. They are acting different. They are talking behind your back. They are analyzing you like you're a case study. But here's the gag. While they're gossiping about your change, you're busy accessing a timeline where their opinions don't even echo. So buckle in. Because in this video, we're diving into the real reason people are whispering, speculating, panicking, and projecting ever since you took your spiritual authority back. And trust me, it has nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with alignment. Let's go deep. Number one, you didn't change. You collapsed a false identity that made others comfortable. You didn't change. You just collapsed a false identity that made everyone else feel comfortable. That version of you was never real. It was a survival costume stitched together from years of conditioning, guilt, people-pleasing, and trying not to rock the boat. That old version smiled when they crossed boundaries, stayed quiet to keep the peace, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and tolerated relationships that drained the life out of you. And let's be honest, people loved that version of you because it was easy to manipulate, predictable, and made them feel in control. Now that you're choosing truth over tolerance, alignment over approval, and peace over pretending, they're scrambling. Not because you've done something wrong, but because they no longer know how to use you. Your transformation didn't hurt them. It exposed how they were benefiting from your silence and your emotional labor. You're not available to play therapist, scapegoat, savior, or background character anymore, and it's got people shaking. Not because you've become harsh, but because you've become honest. You're not cold, you just stopped lighting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. The whispers of "you've changed" are often a disguise for "you're no longer manageable." They miss the version of you that shrank to make others feel tall, that apologized for simply existing, that bent over backwards to keep people from leaving. But that version was a performance. This version is raw, rooted, and unapologetically real. And people don't know how to digest real. They only know how to consume the palatable, watered-down version you used to be. So let them speculate, let them wonder, let them talk. Your soul didn't go through hell and back to return to smallness. You didn't survive the internal wars just to stay likable to people who liked the fake you. You collapsed the identity they could control, and now you're walking in one they can't touch. That's not arrogance, that's liberation. You didn't change. You finally showed up. And the real you isn't interested in fitting in anymore. You came to shift rooms, not blend into them. Number two, your new timeline doesn't require permission to be radical. Your new timeline doesn't require permission to be radical. It doesn't wait for applause, reassurance, or a roundtable meeting of opinions before moving forward. This version of you no longer asks, "Is this okay?" before taking up space. You're not here to be polite about your breakthrough. You're not tiptoeing anymore. You're walking with full steps into a future that no longer carries the weight of other people's expectations. Before, you used to make yourself digestible, less intense, less passionate, less focused, just so people wouldn't feel uncomfortable around your ambition, your insight, your light. Now, you're fully aware of what you carry. You've outgrown explaining your soul to people who only speak survival. You're done handing over your power for the sake of peace. What you've stepped into now doesn't require a support group to validate it. It's divine instruction. And when you move with divine instruction, you start moving in ways that offend the stagnant, confuse the average, and scare the controlling. Radical doesn't mean loud, it means real. It means trusting yourself so deeply that you stop waiting for someone else to agree. It means knowing when it's time to walk away, not with drama, but with clarity. It means making decisions that might make people question your sanity until they see the results. Then suddenly you're brave and inspiring. But let's be honest, they only call you radical when they can't control you. When you start honoring your instincts more than their opinions, you become unpredictable to their system. And anything they can't predict, they try to label as too much, off, or changed. You're not changing, you're returning. Returning to the blueprint of who you were before the world told you to tone it down. And in this new reality you've entered, being unapologetic isn't optional, it's a requirement. You didn't come here to repeat cycles, water yourself down, or keep asking for access to rooms your soul already outgrew. You came to rewrite rules, break patterns, and walk fully in your assignment. This isn't just a new version of you. This is you with spiritual clearance and internal backing. You're not waiting for permission anymore. You are the permission. Number 3, people think you changed because they had you pegged as a character in their story. People say you've changed, but what really happened is this. You stopped playing the character they wrote for you. You weren't just in their life. You were cast in a specific role that made their story easier to navigate. Maybe you were the reliable one, the soft-spoken one, the one who never said no, or the one they could project their insecurities onto without pushback. As long as you stayed inside that character, they felt comfortable. You were easy to manage, predictable, familiar, but something inside you started waking up. You stopped performing. You started asking questions. You stopped saying yes when you meant no. You stopped making yourself available for every emotional emergency that wasn't yours to solve. And now suddenly they're uncomfortable. Not because you're toxic, but because you no longer fit into the role they built around you. What they're calling change is really your refusal to keep pretending. You didn't flip the script to be difficult. You realized there was a script in the first place, and it wasn't written by you. That version of you they liked, that was curated, that was edited, filtered, and heavily policed by your fear of rejection and your hunger for belonging. Now that you've reclaimed your authenticity, they don't know how to respond. Because you're not reacting the way the character would. You're not keeping the story going. You've left the stage, and now they're lost in a narrative that can't function without your compliance. The truth is, they never really knew you. They knew the you that was emotionally negotiating just to survive their version of love, friendship, or family. Now they're looking at someone they can't predict, can't guilt, can't mold, and it's terrifying to them. It shakes the foundation of the story they built around your weakness. They weren't prepared for your strength, so no, you didn't change. You just stopped playing the character they needed to keep their own dysfunction running smoothly. And now that you're finally living as the real you, they're realizing they never had a relationship with your soul, only with your silence. Number 4, you've gained authority because you finally withdrew consent from every energetic lie. You gained authority the moment you stopped co-signing energetic lies, not by raising your voice, not by demanding titles, but by quietly and powerfully withdrawing your consent. You stopped feeding relationships that ran on guilt. You stopped agreeing to dynamics that felt like spiritual contracts signed under pressure. You stopped participating in patterns that drained your essence just to keep the peace. That decision didn't just change your behavior, it changed your entire energetic signature. Your power came from the refusal to keep pretending, the refusal to keep playing small so others could feel big, the refusal to continue negotiating with energies that had no right to sit at your table in the first place. This wasn't rebellion, it was a quiet revolt of truth. You didn't ask for a crown. You took back the authority that was always yours, but buried under years of conditioning and emotional debt. When you drew those internal boundaries, the ones no one could see but everyone could feel, something shifted. You sent shockwaves through old agreements, karmic loops, and soul contracts that were never aligned to begin with. People started falling off, not because you pushed them, but because the expired contracts couldn't hold themselves together once you stopped feeding them your energy. You were the power source the entire time. They were just living off the electricity you didn't even know you were supplying. And now, you walk differently. You speak with a clarity that unnerves people, not because you're better, but because you're free. You no longer carry the invisible weight of everyone else's expectations. You don't seek approval because you know what it cost you the first time around. And that authority, that inner peace, that refusal to sell your soul in small doses, it shines, not loudly, but unmistakably. They're not mad at your growth. They're shook that you reclaimed the jurisdiction of your soul, and they're no longer allowed to operate in it. You didn't just level up, you shut the whole old system down. Number 5, they can't handle you now because you're not easily predicted or controlled. You used to be someone they could figure out. You'd shrink when tension rose. You'd soften your words to avoid conflict. You'd second-guess your truth to protect someone else's ego. You were easy to manage because you were always anticipating other people's reactions before honoring your own instincts. But not anymore. Now you move from a place they don't understand. A place that doesn't rely on permission, popularity, or precedent. You stopped operating from fear and started responding from frequency. Your decisions aren't based on what makes sense to them. They're based on what resonates with your spirit. That's why people are rattled. You're not living in reaction to their moods, their manipulation, or their expectations. You're listening to something higher. You're following a deeper knowing. And that makes you unpredictable to people who only feel secure when they can control the outcome or the person. They don't know what to do with you now because you don't respond the way you used to. Their usual guilt trips don't land. Their passive aggression doesn't faze you. Their silence doesn't shake you. You've moved out of their emotional jurisdiction, and they can't access you through the same doors anymore. You're not operating on survival scripts. You're living from spiritual software now. To them, you've become difficult. But really, you've just become discerning. You're not easily accessed. You're not easily moved. You're not easily tricked into making yourself smaller for anyone's convenience. You've left the linear grid and stepped into something quantum, a realm where your intuition leads, your boundaries hold, and your presence speaks without needing to prove. People who rely on predictability and emotional leverage can't handle that, not because you're being cruel, but because you're no longer available for their version of connection, which was really just control in disguise. You're not mean, you're sovereign. You're not arrogant, you're in alignment. You don't belong to their old maps anymore. You're writing new ones in real time, and that terrifies the people who thought they had you figured out. Number 6. You're being studied like a phenomenon because your frequency no longer matches anything familiar. You've become something people can't explain, and that makes you both fascinating and unnerving to them. You didn't announce your evolution, you embodied it. One day you were in the mud, barely surviving. The next you were walking in peace, glowing with clarity, and making moves that didn't add up in the natural. Now they're watching you like a science project, studying your posture, your words, your silence, your glow. Because your frequency no longer mirrors anything they're used to. You didn't follow the traditional path. You didn't beg for a seat at the table. You didn't campaign for recognition or wait to be seen. You vanished from their narrative and returned with energy they couldn't trace. That alone disrupted their understanding of who you were. How did you do it without them? How did you rise without their validation? How are you at peace when everything about your past says you should still be broken? Your aura is unreadable now because it's not rooted in ego. It's coded with survival, soul refinement, and divine alignment. You stopped performing. You stopped leaking energy into conversations that went nowhere. You stopped being emotionally available for narratives built on guilt and distortion, and now they don't know how to read you because all their old tactics bounce off of you. You're not just unrecognizable, you're untouchable. People aren't just watching, they're obsessing. Not out of love, out of confusion, out of discomfort. Because you broke an invisible rule, you ascended without being chosen by them. You healed without their help. You walked into authority without external permission. They're trying to find the cheat code, but there isn't one. You didn't climb a ladder. You left the building. You didn't win their game. You stopped playing entirely. And that's the part they can't stand. Your freedom exposes their prison. Your silence exposes their noise. Your glow makes them question what they're doing with their own light. So they study you like a phenomenon. Because deep down, They know. What you carry can't be taught, controlled, or copied. It can only be earned. And you earned it in the dark, when nobody was watching. Number 7, this isn't confidence. It's an internal court verdict in your favor. This isn't confidence. This is the energy of someone who has already stood before the highest court, the one within, and received a final ruling. Not guilty of the lies projected onto you, not guilty of the roles they forced you to play, not guilty of the shame, the guilt, the blame, the false narratives. You've been on trial your whole life, judged, dissected, misread. But the verdict is in, and you've been cleared. What people are seeing now and calling arrogance is actually your liberation. You're no longer walking around trying to prove your innocence. You're no longer shrinking to avoid their judgment. You've faced the accusations that lived in your mind, absorbed from others, and dismantled every one of them with truth. You realized you don't owe anyone an apology for being whole, for being wise, for surviving, for evolving. You walk differently now, not because you think you're better, but because you're no longer bowed down under invisible weights. You're not performing humility to make others comfortable. You're not over-explaining your choices or overcompensating for how deeply you've healed. That offends people who are still in emotional debt with themselves, people who never gave themselves permission to rise. So they call your clarity cocky, they label your boundaries rude, they mistake your centeredness for superiority because they haven't yet experienced what it feels like to be truly free. The truth is they're still in court, still defending their worth, still hoping for a jury of people-pleasing validation or applause to set them free. But you fired the jury, you threw out the case, you walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. And now your presence reminds them that freedom is possible. But it costs something they're not ready to give up, the story of their suffering. So no, it's not confidence, it's closure, it's completion. It's spiritual authority born from deep, lonely, invisible battles that no one clapped for. And the ones who misunderstand it, they're not your judge. They're just witnessing what it looks like when someone finally walks without chains. Number 8, you outgrew environments where playing small was the unspoken social contract. You didn't just walk away from old environments, you expanded beyond them. You didn't slam doors or create drama, you simply stopped performing in a place where the unspoken rule was, don't shine too brightly, don't speak too boldly, don't grow too fast. For a long time you played along. You made yourself smaller so other people could feel big. You downplayed your gifts so you wouldn't intimidate the insecure. You watered yourself down, not because you lacked strength, but because you didn't want to make waves. That wasn't humility, it was survival. But something shifted. You woke up to how much it was costing you to stay in rooms where your light had to be dimmed just to be accepted. You began to realize that the so-called peace you were maintaining was really just quiet compliance. You were never really free in those spaces. You were just tolerated as long as you stayed within the limits they set for you. The moment you started breaking those limits, the energy changed. Now they say you've changed, but what they're really grieving is control. They're mourning their ability to predict you, to mold you, to keep you emotionally caged. They didn't love the real you, they loved the version of you that kept their insecurities unchallenged. You used to gaslight yourself just to keep them comfortable. Now you don't. That's what they're reacting to. Not betrayal, liberation. They're uncomfortable not because you're gone, but because your freedom reminds them that they're still choosing captivity. You didn't leave anyone behind. You just stopped crawling to stay in places where you were meant to fly. You didn't cut people off. You grew to a place where their access expired. The version of you that needed approval doesn't exist anymore. And without that version, the social contract is void. You're not arrogant, you're not cruel, you're just clear. And clarity terrifies people who rely on your confusion to maintain their comfort. You're not shrinking anymore, and that alone is the loudest statement you'll ever make. Number 9. The version of you they miss never really existed. It was a survival program. They say they miss the old you, but what they really miss is their power over you. That version they're grieving. The one who smiled through discomfort, swallowed their opinions, softened every truth to keep the room calm. That wasn't you. That was a survival program. That was a version built out of necessity, not authenticity. You didn't choose to be that agreeable, that accommodating, that quiet. You were trained to be. You were conditioned to scan the room for danger, read the emotional weather, and adjust yourself so no one would feel threatened by your truth. What they called easygoing was you in emotional lockdown. What they called sweet was you calculating every word so no one would explode. You didn't have the freedom to be disliked, misunderstood, or judged, so you performed the role that made others feel secure, even as it cost you your own peace. And now that you've stopped doing that, now that you've dismantled the inner machinery that kept you trapped in performance mode, they're uncomfortable. They're not mourning you, they're mourning access. They're mourning the version of you that existed for them, the one who absorbed tension so they didn't have to feel it, the one who kept the atmosphere smooth, even if it meant silencing your own instincts. What they miss is the submission they mistook for kindness. But you were never actually agreeing with them. You were surviving them. You weren't choosing peace. You were avoiding punishment. That wasn't a relationship. That was a one-sided contract with your silence. Now you speak up. Now you pause before agreeing. Now you say no without guilt. And they call it an attitude shift, a glow-up, a change. But really it's a return to your original self before the world told you who you needed to be in order to be safe. You're not mean now. You're just no longer available for emotional negotiations that require your betrayal. They didn't love the real you. They loved how well you disappeared. And the most liberating part, you don't need to explain that to anyone because the real you was never lost. It was just waiting for the performance to end. Number 10. You're now operating from a line of code they don't have access to. You're not acting strange. You've just tapped into a level of awareness that doesn't run on the operating systems most people rely on. You no longer move from fear, from needing to fit in, from trying to be understood. You move from something higher, something ancient and divine, written deep in your spirit like sacred code. And the people who can't decode it? They think you're lost, but really you've just exited their map entirely. Your choices no longer make sense to those who need everything to be logical, safe, and explainable. You don't follow the old scripts anymore. You don't seek approval from the same places. You don't ask for directions from those who never even dared to leave their mental cages. And that frustrates them, not because you're doing something wrong, but because they can't predict you anymore. You've become unreadable to people who once felt confident in managing, manipulating, or measuring you. You stopped asking, "What will people think?" and started asking, "What does my spirit know?" You don't take action because it's trending or popular. You move because your inner GPS, the one tuned to divine intelligence, nudged you forward. That GPS doesn't broadcast, it whispers, and only those who've done the internal excavation can even hear it. They don't realize it, but when they say, "You've changed," what they're really saying is, "You've evolved past our comprehension." Your updates disrupted their system. You no longer register on the emotional frequencies they use to reach you through shame, guilt, peer pressure, fear of being alone. You outgrew those access points. You became spiritually encrypted. You're not invisible because you disappeared. You're invisible because your vibration changed. They can't find you in the same frequency bands they used to. They're scanning for a signal that no longer exists because you upgraded the entire motherboard of your being. And it wasn't about being better. It was about finally being in alignment. You're not running from the world. You're moving in sync with something beyond it. So no, you're not lost. You're just no longer traceable by systems designed to control, not to understand. Number 11, your peace looks suspicious to those who can't function without chaos. Your peace doesn't look like surrender. It looks like rebellion to the ones who are addicted to noise, the ones who measure aliveness by how frantic things feel, the ones who think chaos is a personality and drama is the heartbeat of connection. So when you stopped reacting, when you stopped jumping into every argument, every guilt trip, every emotional trap, they didn't see healing. They saw offense. They saw distance. They saw danger. To people who only know how to function in dysfunction, your calm is suspicious. Your silence makes them restless, not because you're being cold, but because they don't know how to exist without conflict. They confuse peace with punishment because in their world, quiet has always meant the storm is coming. But with you, it's different. Your peace isn't a warning, it's a boundary. It's the result of clarity. It's what happens when someone finally stops bleeding energy into places where nothing ever grows. You're not disengaged. You're just no longer available for conversations that go in circles, for apologies that never lead to change, for emotional ping-pong matches that exist to drain you. You're not here to fix what doesn't want to be healed. You're not here to perform emotional CPR on people who are committed to staying unconscious. That unsettles people who used to rely on your endless availability, who used to thrive off your emotional reactions, your explanations, your attempts to keep the peace while they lit fires. Now they say you've changed. Now they say you've got an attitude. But really, you've just stopped feeding chaos with your attention. You've stopped responding to dysfunction like it's your job to soothe it. You've stopped breaking your own peace just to maintain false harmony, and that's what's making them itch. Not because you're being cruel, but because they can't manipulate what they can't provoke. Your stillness is power. It's a quiet rebellion. It says, I will not dance with dysfunction just because you're uncomfortable in your own silence. And for those who worship noise, who build identity around conflict, who rely on your reactions to validate their games, your peace feels like exile. But it's not exile, it's evolution. Number 12. You're not rebranding, you're reclaiming. You're not putting on a new mask. You're finally taking the old ones off. This isn't some glossy rebrand meant to impress outsiders. This is a sacred reclamation of the real you, the parts that got buried under shame, silence, generational guilt, and emotional survival. The version of you they see now isn't the new you. It's the original you returning from exile. For years you were fractured. You left pieces of yourself behind every time you said yes when you meant no. Every time you quieted your spirit to keep the peace. Every time you shaped yourself to fit the dysfunction around you. You weren't living, you were compensating, performing, negotiating with rooms that only valued your obedience. You wore roles, not identities. You served other people's comfort at the cost of your own wholeness. But something in you snapped awake, not in rage, but in realization. You started collecting the parts of your soul scattered through past decisions, relationships, and false responsibilities. The voice you silenced came back. The dreams you buried resurfaced. The standards you lowered began to rise. And now, instead of building a life around being acceptable, you're building one around being aligned. They think it's a phase. They call it ego. They whisper that you're trying to be something you're not. But they're wrong. You're not performing, you're remembering. And what you're remembering unnerves people who've made peace with forgetting themselves. You didn't elevate to impress. You elevated because staying stuck became too expensive. You're not chasing aesthetics, you're chasing integration. You're not showing off, you're showing up. Fully, finally, and unapologetically. Your glow doesn't come from trends, it comes from truth. And truth is magnetic to the aligned and threatening to the spiritually bankrupt. That's why some people treat your growth like it's violence. They feel exposed by your wholeness because it highlights their own avoidance. They call your healing arrogance because it means they can't control you through your wounds anymore. You're not rebranding, you're restoring. You're not seeking applause, you're walking in authority. And the reason they can't handle you now? You're no longer playing a role in their story, you're writing your own, and this time you're the author, not the actor. Number 13, you became a mirror that exposes what they're avoiding. Your evolution didn't make you a threat, it made you a mirror. And not the kind people admire for beauty or charm, but the kind that reflects back everything they've been trying to outrun. You didn't provoke them, you didn't insult them, you just became clear, and that clarity turned you into a living truth detector. Now, just by existing, just by standing in your authenticity, you expose what they've buried. People don't always hate you for who you are, they hate the way they feel about themselves when they're around you. Your presence reminds them of the work they haven't done, the healing they avoided, the standards they lowered. You became a quiet but blinding light in a room full of people who got comfortable in the dark. And that light doesn't ask questions, it just reveals. You didn't ask them to change. But when you started walking in integrity, they suddenly felt judged by the contrast. You became evidence of what's possible. And that's dangerous to people who've convinced themselves that survival is the ceiling. You started choosing peace over performance, boundaries over approval, inner truth over outer applause, and it broke something in the illusion they were holding on to. It wasn't about you being better, it was about you being braver. Braver than the version of them that gave up a long time ago. That's why they call you intense, why they gossip, why they distance themselves. Because when you speak your truth without bitterness, when you smile without needing to be validated, when you walk away without explanation, they realize they're still negotiating with people you've already outgrown. They're still trying to please systems you've unplugged from. You're not triggering them. They've been triggered for years. You just happen to be the one who shows them that their mask is slipping. You became the unspoken question. Why haven't you faced yourself yet? And most people would rather resent the mirror than do the inner work. But that's not your burden to carry. You're not here to make others comfortable in their denial. You're here to reflect what's real, and that's not arrogance, it's alignment. Number 14, your authority is quiet, but it's making noise in the spirit realm. Your authority doesn't come with a spotlight, a crowd, or a title, and yet it's shaking things at the root. You don't need to announce your power because your presence has become the announcement. You've entered a timeline where your life speaks louder than any speech ever could. The way you move, decide, detach, protect your peace. It's all a frequency now, a vibration that the spiritual realm responds to before you even open your mouth. You're not just walking differently, you're walking with permission from the divine. And that's what changes everything. The old version of you was waiting to be picked, chosen, validated. But that version died quietly the moment you realized the throne wasn't out there. It was inside. You stopped asking to sit at tables where your spirit never fit, and instead built your own, one with contracts written in truth, not trauma. People think silence means you've stepped back. But in the spiritual realm, your silence is strategy. It's declaration. It's proof that you don't have to beg or prove anymore. Your alignment is your authority. And when you speak now, it's not from ego, it's from divine jurisdiction. You're not trying to be heard, you already are, by forces most people don't even believe in. Your choices are no longer based on reactions, they're based on vision, on codes only your spirit can interpret. And when you say no now, it's not rebellion, it's protection. When you disappear, it's not withdrawal, it's recalibration. The spirit realm recognizes it. That's why things start shifting behind the scenes when you take action. Why doors open without you knocking? Why some people exit your life without warning? It's not rejection, it's spiritual housekeeping. The unseen world is responding to the rank you now carry. You don't need applause, you don't need a crowd, you don't even need to be understood. Because what's happening is bigger than visibility. It's about vibration. And your frequency no longer plays in the background. It's center stage in the places that matter most, where angels move, contracts shift, and unseen battles are being won in your favor. That's real authority, quiet to the world, thunderous in the spirit. So now when they whisper, "You've changed," let them. That statement isn't an accusation, it's an unintended confirmation. It means the spell is broken, the mask is gone, the performance has ended. You didn't just change, you returned. You didn't rise to impress the world, you resurrected to reclaim what the world tried to bury. You stopped asking for permission from broken systems. You stopped watering dead soil just to prove your loyalty. You stopped shrinking to fit rooms that required your silence to feel safe. And that withdrawal of consent, that quiet refusal to betray yourself ever again, that's where your new authority was born. Let them speculate, let them talk. They're not watching your downfall. They're witnessing your upgrade. Your stillness isn't passivity. Your detachment isn't bitterness. Your glow isn't arrogance. It's all evidence that you've shifted into spiritual governance. You've signed soul-level contracts now, ones that aren't written in ink but in frequency. You've exited timelines that relied on your confusion to survive. You didn't just move different. You moved higher. And that shift isn't just personal, it's prophetic. You've become a living contradiction to every narrative that said you wouldn't make it without playing small. A spiritual interruption to every lie that claimed your power came from performance. This isn't a phase, it's a divine reintroduction, so walk in your clarity. Walk in your verdict, walk in your quiet thunder. You don't need to explain a frequency they were never tuned into. Let your life be the sermon, your peace be the protest, and your wholeness be the proof. You're not becoming, you've arrived, and every dimension knows it. If this message spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Go ahead and like this video so it reaches someone else who needs this reminder. Subscribe to the channel if you know you're walking a higher path and want more raw, deep and soul-level truth just like this. Comment below. Let me know what part hit you the hardest or what you're reclaiming in this season. Your story could unlock something for someone else. And if you feel called, share this with a friend, a fellow chosen one, Or even that one person who's starting to awaken but doesn't have the language for what they're feeling yet. Be the light, be the mirror, be the confirmation they didn't know they needed. You're not just watching a video, you're aligning with a movement. Let's grow this community of awakened souls together. I'll see you in the next one, powerfully, quietly, and unapologetically aligned. Stay blessed.